Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my Gears of War video game series perspective. And this is another video game series that means a lot to me. It very much helped to cement my gaming library for the Xbox 360 because when you're talking about that time frame, that's when Xbox started pumping out some stuff and pretty much getting more kind of franchises under their belt. Halo helped build it and cement it, and there were some good ones from the original Xbox that Microsoft and other companies needed to do things with, I don't know, Conker's Bad Fur Day. There's this game, Dark Watch, that was like this vampire hunting kind of one that was actually pretty cool and I would wish was backwards compatible. But as they were getting into their kind of second console generation, Halo, yes, was a big kind of central one. We start getting more into Forza as that starts going on and being more of a key kind of thing. But a big one that they built up was Gears of War. And even though I kind of gravitate towards shooters and everything, this series definitely came off with kind of a bang because it's got the whole Mad World trailer and everything, and it kind of has this kind of dour kind of feel and everything to it. And you're like, okay, I'm interested in learning more about that. And then I got the game, and it's like, okay, you know those kind of weird B-movie bro fist kind of things, like jacked up, weird action 80s kind of movies? That's pretty much what Gears of War was able to do. Granted, they do try and tell a more kind of compelling story, but the main kind of focus is these are your band of brothers, you got a gun with a chainsaw bayonet, have fun in third-person shooting mechanics. And it really did set a new standard for third-person cover-based shooters, to where a lot of games would pretty much try and hey, we're going to copy the shit out of that. Are you going to do it well enough? And see, the thing is, this one pretty much set it pretty well standard-wise, but granted, as we see with any kind of franchise, if you let it go long enough, there are going to be other games that do it better and kind of and have it at a more kind of fresh advantage because they've got another kind of set of eyes. Or people that grew up with it and be like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we fucking did this kind of shit? Now, granted, I don't think the Gears franchise is completely screwed over. It is really interesting to kind of make certain kind of comparisons with kind of what was happening with Star Wars moving into the sequel trilogy and Halo kind of moving off with a different studio as well, because this first started with Epic Games. Yes, I'm a weird old man at this point where I know Epic Games as hey, they made these kind of games instead of, we're gonna fucking do Fortnite and all this shit. And it's just really weird to see that transition go on in real time, man. Not that it's some things are bad, because I don't agree with certain things Epic Games has been doing lately. But in the beginning, I'm like, okay, this is made by Epic Games, and then it transitions to the Coalition, which is very interesting that Microsoft has that kind of at least understanding of its franchises, because Halo was big, and Bungie's like, I'm done, and fucking bolted. Don't worry, we'll get to them again. And they went off to do their own thing, and they're like, okay, we'll make a studio and name it after something that's pretty much pivotal to the franchise. 343 Guilty Spark, 343 Industries. And then with this, because the Coalition, COGS, the Coalition of Organized Governments, one of the important kind of governmental organizations within this video games universe, they make it the Coalition. Now, granted, I tend to have a better kind of feeling towards the Coalition with what they're doing, even though they are experimenting in ways that I'm just they didn't kind of hit me with the kind of experimentation that was going on with Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite was we kind of want to ape Far Cry stuff. And I'm like, alright. The thing is, I played a little Far Cry stuff, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of getting the samey kind of stuff, and I would rather have more kind of interesting stuff that we were doing back in old school Halo. Of if you're going to give me a kind of linear kind of experience, do some interesting kind of set pieces, and let me kind of figure out how I want to get out of a room. Kind of like Doom. The kind of shooters that I kind of like to get into, and you kind of see this in Gears as well, is that you're put in a room, and you're given a set of tools, And the thing is, you're not completely told what to do and how to utilize those tools. You're just like, have at it and try and get out of this room. You got to kill all the people, but it's a giant puzzle that you have to kind of figure out. Where it mainly means murdering things in the most interesting kind of way towards you, or the fastest, or maybe just the kind of strangest to see if you can get a glitch to fucking have a dude bleeding out on top of a concrete barrier and then floating as he's like trying to hobble away. Yes, there are weird shit things that happen, especially in multiplayer. Alright. So, yes, that's kind of weird. We'll kind of get into that towards the end. But there are it's really weird that I can really compare the different kind of tactics that the Coalition takes with Gears 5 versus what happens with Halo Infinite. Now, granted, that's just like, okay, listen, gameplay-wise, that needs a little bit working. But I saw the same kind of things that needed tweaking in Gears 5, even though I'm like, okay, I understand what you're trying to do, but I think that the Coalition hit on it kind of more. So, I'm going to show you my games. Because even though I'm a fan of Gears, I have not played all of the games. I have played pretty much the ones that follow the kind of characters that I'm into, and kind of play the way that I like that doesn't completely kind of put me off. So, of course, we got Gears of War 1. Yeah, 360. That one, like, helped really cement so that we got Gears 2 and, like, had the 360, like, alright, we're chugging, we're doing good. This one was pretty good. And then we got, like, the ending to the trilogy, and you're like, alright, Gears 3. This will be kind of interesting to see how this kind of ends out. Then, of course, they decided to do Gears of War Ultimate Edition, which is really kind of weird. This one is a remaster of the original Gears for the Xbox One. And I don't mind that. That's a good tactic. However, I do believe that this franchise is big enough and awesome enough that they could have done a similar thing of like the Master Chief Collection, except like the Marcus Phoenix Edition or whatnot. I mean, it's the biggest kind of one. Now, granted, there was another game like Gears of War Judgment. I got that for free because of like buying one with like bundling, but it was done by People Can Fly, and it was done in a way that was kind of more arcadey, and I just didn't really care for it that much. And then there's Gears of War Tactics, which is done in the style of XCOM, and it's a kind of tactical one that just didn't really grab me. Though granted, it is on Game Pass, and if I feel the need to it, I'll go and play it at some point. But then I got Gears of War 4, which we'll get into throughout their different kind of perspectives. But this was kind of like the Force Awakens kind of bit, and I say that because it has to straddle creating a new kind of trilogy, introducing new characters, making sure that they do stuff that works with the old characters as well, and then continue on from there. And then we got Gears 5. And this is the latest one. Well, except for like Gears Tactics. But the latest in the kind of big number ones. And I enjoyed it. It didn't go kind of crazy like in my Star Wars example and been like The Last Jedi or anything. But it does take some differences. It tries more open world kind of bits, side quests, and something that I really don't like in that choosing branching kind of choices that could potentially affect the story and characters. I'm like, listen, that hasn't really been a thing. And the thing is, then you have to figure out which one is the canon choice. And once you figure out which one's the canon choice, why did you give us the choice in the first place? You know, if you're going to like go with various different kind of choices like an RPG or whatnot, and you roleplay, you're gonna have to be able to branch out for other kind of things, because otherwise you're gonna have to start making a giant fucking Hydra Gila monster kind of thing where it's like, alright, I picked the blue pony in this quest, and 35% of the players picked the orange pony, and it should mean something because the fucking king of this like little town is like, I fucking hate blue ponies or shit. You know what I mean? It starts like there's a reason that they're like, hey, we should do certain kind of things here. Otherwise, we're going to have problems. This mainly pertains to like character deaths and shit. But as you can see, I have my Gears of War shirt on. I have my jacket on, not mainly because of anything kind of like horrendous that the Gears series has done, but just that it works in the weird kind of Tremors-esque way that it does. It doesn't take its... It does try and do serious moments on its own to, like, deal with heavy topics, but you're also running around fighting mole people with chainsaw guns as they, like, explode in viscera and shit like that. It understands how to balance those tones well, and this is more not to be like, they completely and utterly fucked shit up. But, okay, this does some weird, funny, crazy shit, and it has a good time. It's like, yeah. So, Gears 1. The marketing should have been done a little bit better because it was showing this to be this kind of, like, crazy, dour kind of experience. I would explain this as, like, more of a Dark Souls kind of thing. Not that it's like, your asshole's gonna get ripped open by Macho Man Randy Savage and just puked in, but that this is some serious shit. You're gonna be dealing with some heavy shit. Now, granted, there is some heavy shit, but it's like, alright, mole people, they bust out of the ground for Emergence Day. And you're like, what the fuck's going on? Because the lore in this world is fucking nutty as shit. And the basic kind of stuff is like, you got your bros, and you gotta save the the human race on this planet of Sarah from being wiped out by the Locust Horde. These people that bust out of the ground and want to fuck your shit up. The thing is, it gets even kind of crazier than that because there's pretty much an energy war that goes on over this emulsion kind of thing, which is pretty much analogous to, like, gas and stuff like that, except it can do crazier kind of shit. And we got the COG government versus the UIR government, and they're just like, fuck off! And then they all get, like, orbital lasers, and then it starts, like pounding and shit like that on each other before, like, the UIR pretty much gets, like, shit canned. And then the COG's like, yeah, we won. And, like, pretty much almost immediately after they won this, like, 60-year war, the mole people be like, bitch, eat me. And everybody's like, fuck this shit! And humanity starts getting screwed over. They start utilizing the Hammer of Dawns to try and, like, contain shit, but it just starts making shit worse. Our main character that we follow in this series is Marcus Phoenix, voiced by the same voice actor that does Bender from Futurama. It's great. It's just awesome. So we see that it's like 14 years after, like, Emergence Day, and we find out that Marcus Phoenix was, of course, imprisoned because he defied orders and tried to save his father during everything going down, and his dad was, like, dead and whatnot. They're like, screw you, man. And the thing is, it becomes so dire, his friend Dom pops up and be like, hey, we kind of need you because we're gonna try and get this light mass bomb to put it into the subterranean shit and kill the Locust. It's like, alright, cool, let's see how this kind of works. So we kind of see them kind of, like, bonding and understanding the characters. We see this Lieutenant Kim dude and this Carmine character, this reoccurring character where he's essentially the Kenny kind of character, except he doesn't come back himself. They just keep throwing out other family members that just are like, hey, I'm Carmine, and then he dies. And it's like, hey, I'm Carmine, and then he dies. And then the third one's like, yo, I'm Carmine, and he doesn't die. I thought, alright, that's cool. So we're going through, and our main gameplay objectives are to usually get through certain kind of things. You have certain kind of choices that you can make depending upon what your kind of play style wants to be. If you want to go over this kind of route and deal with more combat or less combat, not really any kind of stealthy sections. So if you're into stealth, you really wouldn't want to do this because, I mean, you're like running around roadie running style. Like, you can go up to enemies and use your chainsaw bayonet, blue. Mainly close quarters combat can work pretty well, but sometimes you have to, like, figure out kind of what difficulty you're on. When you're on insane difficulty, which is the hardest one, you really don't want to run up to a motherfucker that easily. Because this is one of the ones that, as I'm playing through, usually similar to Halo, as I've gotten older and gotten more used to the series, I go to the maybe like the second lowest, hardest difficulty. And I do that to pretty much give myself enough of a challenge and also to enjoy the story. because otherwise sometimes like the difficulty on certain kind of things, like if you go for hard, it's just like I don't want to keep doing this same section, and it completely screws up your enjoyment of the story. Where sometimes it's so easy and you're like, I'm bored out of my mind and I don't care about this story. So you kind of want that kind of basic kind of thing where you're like, yeah, I'm trying to figure out and play the game and be interested in this, while understanding, be like, whoa, cool, okay. We see that the Locusts are doing their shit. Our commanding officer, Lieutenant Kim, gets taken out by General Ram, who is, character design wise, fucking awesome. However, his boss battle is, god damn, like, boss battle wise, there are other vastly better boss battles that were done in this game. But he's like the big end game boss that you get, like that big ass dude. Yeah, I'm gonna fight him. However, you don't get into like a chainsaw bayonet fight with him. That would have been, fuck. Game's been out forever. That would have been a fucking badass way to do it. Yeah, that one was kind of weird. But you're going through, you're learning stuff about Marcus Phoenix doesn't really like authority. It's because you see that the COG government isn't the best kind of representation, because they got some really kind of like crazy ass kind of things. It gets worse as the series kind of goes on. And we see that they're also the stranded, who are stranded outside the cities and just trying to live. It's like, okay, we got the Locusts, we got this thing called the Krill Horde, which, like, if you're not in some kind of territory, you get fucking like annihilated by those bad motherfuckers, which then become a kind of, it's really kind of cool, because you're going through, you're doing this thing, it's like, okay, they actually have you go through these certain scenarios, learn these certain mechanics, and it becomes an important thing as you're fighting the last boss of the game, because you're like, oh, okay, thanks for that. So you have to go through all this kind of stuff, but you're bonding with like Dom, Baird, and Coltrane, baby. Fucking hell, I love Coltrane, because you get to the end of the credits and he starts singing this song, and it's just so fucking funny. Like, yeah, I watch the credits because sometimes you never know what pops up, but anytime I would finish like Gears 1, I would always be like jamming to that song at the end, and I'd be like, I fucking love you, Coltrane. You're just fucking amazing. And it's great because you learn that him and Barrett are pretty much like brothers, and Coltrane used to be the equivalent of a like football player, and that he was a big kind of like famous one, and he loved the game and he loved playing all that kind of stuff, and seeing how it kind of changes having to fight to save humanity to do all those kind of things is like, alright, cool, I like Coltrane. He's just a fucking great character. Baird is that sarcastic asshole that's like, yes, I'm your tech dude, fuck off with certain shit, man. He just, and then he becomes grumpier as the series goes on, especially when it shifts like 25 years between the 1, 2, and 3, and like 4 and 5. I'm just like, yeah, I totally get you, Baird, now. Shit. Though granted, I'm somewhere between Baird and like Old Man Phoenix, where it's like, I have to deal with this fucking shit again. Now granted, they don't take over the entirety. They do at least do a good job of being like, okay, these characters still exist, and they still pop up and are important to the story, but they do focus on those new characters. So, you have to deal with various scenarios within the first one of like trying to pretty much get to certain places, get certain things for the light mass bomb, and then you pretty much have to do this train and have this fight with General Rom. And it's not the best, especially on like insane difficulty. You'll just fucking, oh god, it's nuts. Because you got General Rom pretty much walking around with a goddamn fucked up, taken off Troika machine gun thing. Like a turret. He's walking around, this beastie ass motherfucker is like, you know what, I like this turret. And he just fucking takes it, walks around with it, be like, fuck you. And Krill are like pretty much his shield kind of thing, so you gotta pretty much like blast those off with your shotgun or whatnot, and then snipe him with a sniper rifle. Oh, also, not only do we have this whole system of hover mechanics and chainsaw bayonets. We also have this system of active reload, and this is a pretty interesting system that other games have also decided to utilize as well, where not only do you reload, you also have a chance to get a boost if you reload perfectly. So, say, alright, picture there's like a bar over my head or like in the chest. So, you hit the reload button and you could wait to the end and it would just reload normally, but it takes a little bit longer. But in the middle of that kind of bar, you'll have this kind of little section where if you hit right where this one little tick will hit, boom, your whole clip now does extra damage and everything. So it helps you and rewards you for doing that kind of better play. So it's like, alright, this is kind of cool. So you're like, alright, you shoot ROM with a certain kind of thing, and then you active reload to get a better sniper rifle shot, and then you headshot that motherfucker, and you know, bam, bam, bam. Fuck your shit. And then you take his ass out. It's like, yeah, fuck you, man. As the things go, explode things, and then we see this mysterious queen bring it up. It's like Queen Mira, and we start learning about the Locust Horde a little bit more as we go through. And it's like, okay, so we got the mole things, and we see that Jacinto is the place that it's this Jacinto Plateau, pretty much supposed to be all rock and everything, that the Locust can't tunnel through. And we go into the second one, and we learn that things are going even nuttier. We see them trying to figure out what's going on. We see that there's this giant redworm monster, a giant, pretty much Tremors-ass motherfucker, that's pretty much sinking other cities and destroying stuff. It's like, that's not good. So you're fighting the Locust more. It's more, you see that they're kind of themed over different kind of like seasons. This is the more kind of like fall kind of one that this is fall or kind of like winter-ish, because we get to kind of spring. No, first one would be kind of more fall. This one would be kind of more winter, I think. And then the other one would be kind of spring, because everybody's kind of got a different kind of vibe thing going. Because, let's see here. You got your BeefyCon armor like this. Light's going a little bit weird. And then you see that it's got more of a kind of like feel that it's like, okay, that's kind of colder. Before you're like, hey, everybody's kind of got like guns out and shit. It's like, alright, so it's gotten a little bit hotter. Definitely because we get to like more emulsion in there. But this is where we start getting introduced to that there were problems with the emulsion, that they start learning that the Locust... Well, we learn in this trilogy that the Locust were pretty much used as hybrids to like deal with like the Lambent, which is an infection because the emulsion is actually alive and kind of a parasite too, even though you could somehow use it as an energy source. It gets kind of weird, you know what I mean? It's like they could have handled it a little bit better, but it's like, alright, fine, fuck it, whatever, go for it. That way we gotta deal with like explodey motherfuckers. Which, by the way, dealing with these screeching little bastards, the wretches, when they're fucking in Lambent form, it's like, shit, shotgun deals pretty well, but you gotta make sure that you don't like take them down next to you, because they will blow up and like fuck your shit up. But we see that they're trying to like deal with like everything going on. We get more understanding that the Locust needed to get out because the Lambent shit was fucking them up, and we gotta get to the surface. Granted, you didn't have to like fucking annihilate people to do that, but they were human experiments dealing with like creatures in the Hollow and creating this whole kind of race of mole people kind of things. And we find out that like Queen Mira is kind of like immune to that kind of shit, and allows her to be able to be like the Hive Queen mind Borg thingy to it. It's like, alright, let's see how this works. Well, we see that they have to deal with this kind of riftworm thing, and that leads to one of the craziest fucking segments where you're inside the riftworm and you pretty much utilize your chainsaw bayonet to fucking like destroy its heart to kill it, and then you kind of have to like fucking chainsaw your way out of the goddamn thing. That was funny and disgusting. And another thing for the first one, I also I enjoyed the first game so much and utilized it as a thing for like a high school project detailing like violence in video games and everything like that. That was an interesting kind of thing to do. Yeah. So we get into the second one, and they're dealing with the whole kind of rift thing, but they of course are then in the Hollow, kind of learning stuff going on. And we see that Dom has been wondering where his wife has been. and he's reunited with her. However, she's pretty much been tortured and screwed up, and he decides to uh, kill her to put her out of her misery. And it's a really kind of big thing and a really kind of heavy thing for Dom to deal with. And it's really kind of weird that I'm bringing up that's like, hey, their form of energy is also kind of a parasitic fucking thing that's doing some weird shit. And now Dom's got to deal with this heavy ass shit. Granted, it doesn't. It's not like the tones completely clash, but they could have done a little bit better to kind of like interweave it. There are certain kind of like anime that have the same kind of problem, except they go completely wackadoodle on certain ones. Though there are certain good examples where you get that kind of harmony of what you're trying to do, of like, hey, this is fucking stupid ass silly, and this needs to be taken seriously. But it really affects Dom, as we see later on in like Gears 3, where he's like bearded hobo man of just like, I'm dealing with shit, and it's like everybody's like, you get it, you're like, I'm sorry Dom, I'm sorry. But we get through that. They're dealing with that. They deal with a fucking giant, okay, Bruma. This is like, how would I describe this big beefy bastard? You've got certain kind of ones of the locust hordes. You got your drones that you deal with, your basic grunts that you're taking out. You got your giant dudes that have like this boomer thing, which you're able to, that's like a boom kind of thing. And got your krill. You got weird, crazy things that can like try and resurrect people with these torque bows and everything. Yeah, you got a lot of crazy weapons. Though the locust horde ones, the mainly ones are like the boom shot, which is pretty good, and the torque bow, which fires an explosive arrow and has like blades for the like bow parts that like come up. It's really fucking sweet. And if you're fucking good with it, you can fucking headshot motherfuckers and like have their heads pop with not even just the explosive tip of the arrow. You're just like, you perfect reload, you shoot the thing in the head, it's like, yeah, fuck you. Let's see. So they learn more about that. They fight that Brumok to pretty much stop what's going on for the whole Jacinto Plateau to pretty much be destroyed. But they kill that thing with the Hammer of Dawn. Seawater floods in and kind of washes out the hollow, and then it kind of sets us up for Gears 3. Because at the end we heard that like Adam Phoenix is alive. Now granted, there's some retconning shit that kind of happens. We get at the evidently, like, the head dude in charge, Prescott, had, like, left the COG, and then he came back and was like, hey, I gotta get this shit going on. He gets mortally wounded, tells him to pretty much get this thing to the Colonel Hoffman dude, who's pretty much the main pain in the ass that Marcus has to deal with. And they have to you deal with more Lambent kind of threats in this one, even getting to the point where humans are getting infected with the whole emulsion thing and becoming Lambent themselves. And we find out that Adam Phoenix is alive and has been dealing with the whole kind of Lambent problem and had been kidnapped and is set on this island. There's hurricane generators and stuff that are keeping it, and it was like a rich elite kind of thing for them to be kept there. And we learned that he had made this kind of thing that would be able to destroy the Lambent. And he was been trying to kind of work with Mira to make sure that it would kind of also not kill the Locust, but he wasn't able to do everything in time with that. She's like, don't fucking do that shit. He's like, sorry! And they pretty much activate the device. But the thing is, in order for him to understand the whole kind of Lambent infection, he had to use the Lambent cells on himself, and he dies. And Mira's like, fuck that dude. And then Marcus kills her with a knife that was Dom's, because Dom sacrifices himself in this part because they needed to get fuel for a submarine to get to the secret island. And it was kind of cool also because Carmine doesn't die in this one, and he was a kind of cool kind of brother, because you got Carmine in the first one, dies. You get Carmine in the second one, dies. And then this one's like the bigger kind of older brother. He's like, yeah, I'm cool, man. So I actually liked how it kind of ended off, and I was wondering kind of what they would do with the next kind of Gears series. So it's like, alright, the Locusts are pretty much done with. Where are we going to kind of go from here? And then it's like, alright, we're going to essentially do Locust 2.0, except this time they're the Swarm. So we get Gears 4 then. That one is 25 years later. we are pretty much set in the shoes of Marcus's son, JD, following JD, his friends Kat and Dell as they're dealing with this. Because, let's see. JD and Dell were part of the COG. The COG got reintroduced. They tried to pretty much rebuild the population, but they're becoming somehow even more kind of fascistic than they were previously, utilizing robots and stuff like that to kind of keep the population under control and not do protests and stuff. However, they did do a protest and at a settlement, and JD and Dell were part of it, and they fired upon civilians. They didn't like that, and they decided to go AWOL and decided to join Kat, who was an outsider, who's like, fuck the shit that the COG are doing, and just do their own kind of thing. So they pretty much were introduced to them kind of going through this place, trying to get resources for their settlement and everything like that, fighting the robots. It's like, alright, cool, because they need more. They don't have the effective resources. They want to make sure that their population doesn't get completely shit on, so they're using these DBs, which we find out are later made by Baird, Damon Baird. It's like, yeah, which is important because we get to the end, and one of the coolest kind of things for this was that we get to fight giant mech things, and just, it was nuts. I'm like, okay, and it still follows along the same kind of trajectory and gameplay styles that you're used to. So your third person shooting as this giant fucking mech thing, and it's like, this actually works out pretty well. I was like, I didn't know I wanted this, and I didn't know how well this would be executed, but it worked. But the main conceit here is understanding what this new threat is, even though I understand that you have to balance newcomers to the series and old to the series, because I'm following this where it's like, yeah, I kind of know this information. Granted, it's not to the complete effect that they're essentially copying themselves. It's just sometimes people are not. You have to balance that it can be somebody's first game, and I can understand some overlap and being like, here's what we did with the Locust, here's this place where they're experimented on, because that happens more in the fifth one, and being like, yeah, I get that. I played this shit before. Yeah, I'm here because I'm a fan of this and everything, and I understand. It's always, I get it, because sometimes it's weird that somebody's like, yeah, Gears 4, Gears 5 was my first game. And I understand that people be like, why didn't you start with the first couple ones? Granted, I can understand, because they're like, hey, because I didn't get them or whatnot. However, Xbox's strength of their backwards compatibility is that you can get the original ones because they're backwards compatible. So you could find these discs, or you could just buy them digitally and you could play them. But my whole kind of view on that is that if you want to start off on the new game, that's cool. Granted, that does mean that when game developers make the games, they're going to have some repeat information, and that could annoy veterans. It does present some annoyance to me, but I would rather have it so that way the story makes sense and that people who are new to it can understand what's going on. As long as it's not like you essentially copied and pasted it from the other game and just been like if you're playing the game and then suddenly, boom, you're from the other game, and it's like, this is what has happened last time on Dragon Ball Z. Actually, I wouldn't mind it if it was done that way. Where you're essentially playing it, and then you get to the part where it's about to be like, we gotta give them this information lowdown. Boom. That would be funny and entertaining to me. But I understand that kind of balance. So when I say that it kind of repeats certain things, it's kind of important things that if you're new to this series, you kind of want to make sure you know. And I would rather that be done rather than hide it in some war thing and some new person's like, I didn't get that and I didn't understand that. You know what I mean? Lore needs to be value add, not the important fucking part of the thing, of the story. If I have to go through 30 fucking entries to figure out what's going on in a story, I would have rather have read it. If I need to read through books to understand what I'm playing, I would rather have it be a book or a movie. You gotta thread that fine line. Sorry, I'm kind of like bringing this up, but it's an important aspect that I could understand people who are new or veterans or have a kind of clash point with. And that's important because you're trying to make sure that you've got those people from the older ones coming in for these new ones. And I've been okay with this so far. I'm like, okay, I liked JD's kind of style and his funny kind of aspects. I liked Dell's style as well, and the interaction that they had with Kat and everything. It's like, okay, two cogs, one that was an outsider and trying to figure out what's going on. So they get their stuff back to that kind of base, and then the fucking swarm thing happens, and everything's like, fucking shit. And JD and Dell are like, this is kind of weird. We gotta go talk to the old man. So you go through, you find grumpy ass old Phoenix just sitting out there because the Cog are like, we don't want to deal with you. Because evidently he got together with Anya and had, of course, JD. And she died in childbirth, but she was also the first, the new kind of leader of the government in the new iteration of the Cog. And then, of course, she died, and then the Cog were like, yeah, we're gonna do stupid shit. And it's like, fuck. And of course, they're trying to go after that. There's this whole kind of like helicopter chase sequence and stuff, but we learned that like after the device was kind of utilized, the Locusts turned into these crystal ass things, and they just fucking pushed him into a goddamn mine or whatnot, and just like put him in holes and shit. It's like, you don't think that's gonna make a fucking problem? However, this one at least has a lot of things going on. I would almost say too much, but yet you still get enough kind of character and the personal connection for you to be like, all right, let's kind of see what goes on, because they're looking at stuff, and then this snatcher ass thing gets Marcus Phoenix, and then they start chasing that fucking thing for a while because it's JD's dad. It's like, I want my dad to not be fucking eaten by this fucking thing, and then they're dealing with these fucking goopy things coming out of the pods. It's like, that ain't good. That's Locust 2.0 shit. It's like, yep. So evidently it didn't like kill him, it just put him into a chrysalis kind of thing. It's like, and it's like, do we have anything to deal with the kind of like emulsion thing? It's kind of weird. I could have rather have had another kind of threat, like anything else. I'm like, okay, I get that the Locusts were an important part of the original trilogy. However, I think that after what you were able to do with the third one, it would have just been better to come up with some other kind of threat. Because, okay, we're dealing with the Locust again. Except this time you got certain different kind of tactics. You kind of have different kind of boss battles, which I think work better than when they tried to implement boss battles in Halo. And I don't like saying that because Halo, I like Halo series. Halo is more my favorite. Not that I hate it. It's like whenever I try and talk about certain music things. AC/DC is my favorite band, but that doesn't mean I think that Van Halen sucks, or Led Zeppelin sucks, or the Beatles suck. I just like them more. It's like a subjective kind of thing. And there are some objective songs and be like, yeah, these other bands have better songs. I'm like, yeah, I'll be able to do that. Now granted, would I like them as much? Probably not. It just kind of depends upon what kind of song or whatnot. And here, I'm just like, yeah, Gears does these boss battles kind of better. However, there are certain parts where you scale on the difficulty. It's like Bullet Sponge. That does happen. I will acknowledge it, and I wish it was better. There are better ways to do boss battles with first-person and third-person shooters. If you go with just giant health pool, it gets kind of boring because you're just like, button, push, button, push, button, push, button, push, shoot, 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 and you just hope to God you have enough ammo or whatnot. It's like, alright. It's less of a test of skill and more of an endurance test of will I fall asleep. But they're able to get Marcus out. He's able to be like, hey, there's some kind of hive-ass thing going on here. We kind of have to kind of deal with that. And they start being like, what the fuck's kind of going on? And they kind of go through, pinpoint where it's at. Of course, they utilize the giant mechs, and we find out that Kat's mother, Reyna, has been utilized as the kind of hive thing queen for this kind of iteration, and that she kills her to lay her out of her misery and takes this thing that was from her grandmother, and you find out that Kat is, her grandmother was Queen Mira. And it almost, I didn't make this connection, but it almost falls into the same kind of realm of Palpatine having a granddaughter. it's like, when the fuck did that happen, and where the fuck did that happen? It's like, alright, I've seen you doing most of this shit around for those first three games. When and where did you have time to fucking, like, have a kid? And then just be like, here it is. And it's, now granted, that's probably, like, again, put into, like, the lore, which we've now discussed upon that of, like, hey, if I gotta dig for it like that, which is an important kind of plot point, you really need to do something with that. You know what I mean? If it's main, you gotta have it in there. If it value adds, it's okay to have it in lore. Like, this thing about, like, Queen Mira, like, I'd rather prefer them to kind of actually explain how that would kind of go on, and then, like, having the lore, like, maybe the courtship of Queen Mira and whoever it was to get to that point. That adds value. I need to be like, how did she even fucking do this? But it's like, oh god, this character that we've been following, then we're like, oh, okay, she has this crazy connection. And, of course, that leads to Gears 5, where they're trying to fight the Swarm, because the Cog's like, we ain't dealing with this shit. You're bullshitting us. And then they start fucking up and kind of taking on, and are able to somehow, like, take control of the robots as well. And they're like, okay, we got a fucking problem. Because they're like, our robo dudes are fucking with us. We are not cool with this shit. So, we see pretty much the breakdown of the group, because we learned that, like, JD had, like, given the order or whatnot on this, like, protest. And that he kind of recklessly, loses his arm, kind of is fucked up and goes into kind of a nuttier mode. And Kat's just trying to find out more about herself, and Dell goes along to kind of help her out. And it works, mainly because there's also the kind of co-op abilities. Not abilities, but, like, you could do co-op, mainly just, like, 2-player. And then, of course, there's the multiplayer. Now, granted, I'm more into the story here, though the multiplayer was pretty fun. I'd mainly played, like, the first one as you're running around with a shotgun. That got fucking nutty. It was pretty much like shotgun rushing and shit. And, which, it still has problems, but as I've gotten older, depending upon the crazy shenanigans that goes on in multiplayer games, I'm just more into the stories and the worlds, more so than the multiplayer. It kind of depends. If the gameplay is fun enough for me, and the amount of frustration that I have to deal with, either, like, lag, cheaters, hackers, just complete nuttery of, like, psychologically manipulative tactics of, like, you need to keep playing like this way. It's like, I don't care. So I just go play certain things and just, like, bounce off. Like, I'll be more the one that's like, I would like the campaign, please. It's like, alright, cool. So, we had giant robots in the last one. Now we're going to do some light open world kind of exploration stuff. Now, this one works a little bit better on that kind of front, because we have had our Force Awakens kind of moment where we are reintroduced to the world. There's some kind of similar kind of problems that you got to deal with, but I'm more interested in these characters. We still have our nostalgia characters around that do their cameos and everything. It's like, alright, cool. We got Marcus, we got Damon, we got Coltrane and everything, and we're like, alright, cool. And they don't overshadow the new characters, because now we're given our chance to use more of the new characters and explore them more. That is definitely a strength of the fifth one. And they don't, like, completely shit on the older characters. The older characters are like, yeah, we'll support you. We're old and we shouldn't really be doing this, but I'm definitely going to help your ass out because we're going to be fucking eaten by Mole People 2.0. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they're just completely useless or completely character assassinated. They're just like, alright, you're doing some shit that's going to help you out. So she's pretty much able to learn the whole kind of stuff with the sires and them fucking with shit. Let's see. She's trying to get people to come into the cog and everything because they want to stop the swarm. Swarm. Why am I saying it that way? Swarm. And she's not able to really get, like, her uncle to, like, do everything because he kind of was supposed to. It was made off that he would, like, died in the first one of this new trilogy, 4, and then he was like, nah, I kind of, like, cut my way out of this fucking snatcher ass thing, but then he kind of gets taken out. We see them going through these vast different kind of, like, locales, some deserts, some icy places and everything. We do get a nice varied up environment here, which was kind of like one of the problems I had with Halo Infinite, in that there was not as much variety as there usually is in a Halo game. And that's why I kind of want to give props to this, because like, okay, cool, we're going around on ice, doing some kind of stuff, doing some light, I say light side quests because they're experimenting here. There's still enough of the action set pieces and the funneling for pretty much more of a linear kind of thing, but then it opens up enough that you're able to do certain kind of things like go over here, get some lore, get some kind of resources and everything for upgrades, light RPG kind of things of like upgrading and making yourself powerful and doing kind of stuff like that, and having these kind of vehicles and everything. It's the better kind of way for the experiment because it doesn't seem too obtrusive. They're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, and it's like, okay, cool, I'm good with this. Now, they pretty much learn that kind of stuff. This AI dude pretty much tries to make Kat the new Hive Queen, but she's like, eat my ass, and then this somehow forces a resurrection of her dead mom to be the, like, Hive Queen again. It's like, shit, we gotta fucking deal with this shit. We gotta get this Hammer-Dawn shit back online to kind of deal with this. Because they kind of took it offline because it fucked up JD, and JD's like, I'll help you guys out. And he's got a kind of, like, arm thing that's, like, I think a prosthetic because it got blown off. Because in the first part of 5, it's like he got fucked up by a Hammer-Dawn that was going fucking nutty as shit. But he does reconcile with them before they have to deal with this giant, like, fucking worm thing. That was actually a pretty cool thing, as they're doing this kind of, like, space thing to get everything set back up before they get back to the town, like, the main city, as things are going nuts with this Kraken thing and resurrected Reyna. There also has been this thing, like this Berserker thing, which was actually an interesting kind of enemy to kind of deal with. That boss battle, though irritating a little bit, was kind of cool to kind of deal with in the icy kind of mountain areas of the 5th one. So, the thing is, it's like a Berserker kind of thing, and you usually utilize the Hammer-Dawn because it's like fucking nutty to deal with. This is the thing you do not usually want to fuck with and can kill you pretty easily. It's armored as shit. It doesn't see, but it will hear you, so you have to walk very carefully, and you utilize the Hammer-Dawn to make it like pretty much melt like a motherfucker. Except, you kind of had to deal with it in this underground area, this matriarch kind of thing. That was kind of nutty, but that kind of helped them make sure that Kat didn't get turned into the new Hive Queen. Well, we get towards the end, and this is where it gets nutty. Everything up until this point, experimenting-wise, had it been completely and utterly nutty. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I completely like this, but it is not completely detracting me from this series. Here, we get the choice of, we have to save JD or Del from Reyna killing either one of them. And I'm just like, I kind of like them both. Now, I mainly was more partial to JD because that's Marcus's son, and I've gone through all the rest of the games, and I love Marcus. Marcus is a great character. He cares for his people, and he's funny as shit when the need arises, and I'm just like, that's his son. And that's not to say that Del wasn't bad. I liked him as well, and he's usually funny. The problem is, in the 4th one, they kind of rotated, and they weren't as defined. Like, at certain points, you'd have one be the funny one, certain ones, another be the serious one, and they kind of rotate on this. They got at least a little bit more better defined in this one, where Kat's trying to figure out who she is, what she wants to do, and she still had that kind of, like, still was able to joke and everything like that, but she's like, oh shit, I gotta deal with my mom and all that shit being being resurrected as this Hive thing. And the person that's been with her most of that journey is Del, so you do get that connection with him as well, so you do have that kind of thing going on. You do have to weigh those options. However, I'm like, alright, what is going to be the canon thing? Like, what's going to be going on with Gear 6? Who's going to be the one that's alive? You know? It proposes that whole thing of, like, canon choices, and I think that was a misstep to have that big of a decision be put within the player's hands of usually something that we've been doing linearly so far. Because once you start opening that up, you either have to pick a canon choice or you have to start making branching paths, and then it's going to make the game sprawl. Like, there's a reason you usually have such limited choices in certain games. Though, granted, if you end it like fucking Mass Effect, I'm gonna have to fucking do Mass Effect one of these days. And you end it with essentially what colors you want to choose, and that the choices that you have really aren't as affected with what you've done before, that becomes problematic as well. That should have been at least a little bit more expanded than what it was. I understand it makes it bigger, but when your whole fucking marketing thing is choices, that's a problem that you have to deal with head on. And if you pretty much decide that, hey, we're just going to limit the choices, that's when you lose certain people. Exhibit A, example. I'm like, okay. So we'll have to see how this kind of works out. Because I don't think having those kind of bigger decisions pretty much just put on the players, and then that the game developers have to kind of pick on after and be like, which one do we follow? That just creates a big kind of issue that we'll have to see. But we see that they like get towards the end, they have to kill the Kraken thing, and we get that Jack, who's been pretty much just this little robot character that has like been with you pretty much through most of the series, sacrifices himself to be like a homing thing for the Hammer of Dawn to destroy the thing and save the rest of the people as they have to deal with and figure out how they're going to take the war to the Swarm for the next part of the story. So I'm interested to see how that kind of works out. And I just love this series because it's fun to play. Even though it kind of follows the same kind of second-to-second kind of gameplay, you're able to figure out different kind of ways, and you're like, all right, this is kind of weird, this is kind of cool, and then just figure out new different kind of things. Especially within like the fifth one, because of different environments, they allowed you to like be on this kind of icy lake at one point, and then you can figure out, do you want to shoot at the people or do you want to shoot at the ice to have them fall through and die that way? And it introduced environmental kind of tactics as well, which was a nice addition that I'm like, thank you. And it just follows that kind of like cheesy 80s to 90s action movie stuff that is like part of it that it accepts and sometimes like dials down for, if that makes sense, to make sure that if a serious thing's popped up, like Kat dealing with her heritage of, oh my god, I'm related to the Queen of the Locusts, or dealing with like the problems that the COG government have had with like human population and utilizing extreme fascist tactics of like suppressing protests and shit and utilizing robots and shit. It's like, wow, okay, they do make those work pretty well, while also having levity and humor throughout. I could get why people would be like, hey, that kind of seems Marvel-ish in how it's done. I don't think it reaches that level where you do something and then boom, you got a Marvel quit. Though granted, there can be certain instances that have that kind of effect. It's not to like Marvel's formula, you know what I mean? And it's not to such an extent that you see them kind of trying to copy that. I would more accept that kind of criticism on the fourth one, though. They kind of even it out a little bit better in the fifth one, if I remember right. And granted, I didn't go through a complete playthrough on this one. It's just, I want to talk about it. Let's see. Anything else for this? Well, I'm just really excited to see kind of what other kind of Gear stuff's going on. It's not completely in like my most hyped, but it's definitely one that I always kind of look forward to and hope that Xbox gives the kind of due that it's deserved. And I'm always excited to see other kind of series pop up as well. It's just, this one is another kind of big one that helped shape me as a gamer and really helped me understand what I kind of want out of a third-person shooter as well. As specifically cover-based shooter. It's like, alright, this gets it, this feels good, and it's just fun to play. And I'm like, alright, this is what I kind of look for standard-wise, and it doesn't have to play like this. But to that same level of polish of where all of your systems work well together. Your story, your characters, how your gameplay works out, and what you just kind of do, and just have that fun package. And I think they've been able to keep that going. They are tinkering around with it, so we'll see how those tinkerings with the formula work. Some stuff won't work, some stuff will, and we'll see what kind of wins out and how this series kind of evolves from here. So that is my perspective on the Gears of War video game series. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the series, if you don't like the series, if you agree with me on certain things, if you disagree on certain things, what you feel about the series, if you never played the series, if you have any thoughts, if you're like, I'm interested in it, or what should I do and how should I get there, you know what I mean? Just talk to me in the comments down below. And, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.